9 years old, alone, sent across the ocean to a rural boarding school where he didn't speak a word of the language. Most people would have folded, but this boy was different. He wasn't just surviving, he was learning how to build the future. This is the story of how a kid from Taiwan, who started his business in a Denny's booth, became the architect of the AI age and turned Nvidia into a trillion-dollar empire. Before artificial intelligence became a global arms race, before data centers turned into the new oil fields, there was a quiet revolution happening inside silicon. And at the center of it stands one man, Jensen Huang. Not just a CEO, not just an engineer, but the architect of the AI age. Today, Nvidia powers everything from gaming to supercomputers to generative AI systems that are reshaping civilization. But this story does not begin in Silicon Valley. It begins thousands of miles away, in Taiwan. Jensen Huang, born Jensen Huang in 1963 in Tainan, entered a world far removed from the technological empire he would one day build. His early childhood was shaped by a modest environment and traditional expectations. But destiny shifted early. At 9 years old, his parents made a decision that would redefine his life. They sent him to the United States, alone. It was not an elite preparatory school waiting for him. It was a boarding school in rural Kentucky called Oneida Baptist Institute. The environment was harsh. This wasn't just a school. It was a place where students worked. Jensen was assigned to clean the toilets every day while other kids were older and often aggressive. He spoke almost no English, but he didn't complain. He learned to communicate through hard work and a deck of cards. Culture shock was immediate. The language barrier was severe. At times, he was misunderstood. At times, underestimated. But adversity became fuel. Instead of retreating, Huang adapted. He observed. He worked harder. He sharpened discipline. This period forged something critical: resilience under pressure. He later said that this experience taught him that no task was beneath him, a trait that would later define Nvidia's survival in its most fragile years. Huang pursued electrical engineering at Oregon State University. It was here that he met Lori Mills, his future wife and lab partner. He told her he would be a CEO by the age of 30, a bold claim for a student with nothing but an engineering kit. His technical instincts matured: circuits, semiconductors, signal pathways. He was no longer just adapting. He was mastering systems. He later earned his master's degree at Stanford University. Silicon Valley was not yet the myth it would become, but its gravitational pull was undeniable. Engineering was not just academic training for Huang, it was the language of creation. Before Nvidia, Huang worked at AMD and later at LSI Logic. These were formative years inside the semiconductor industry. Brutal competition, razor-thin margins, constant innovation cycles. He observed how companies survived. He studied where they failed. Most importantly, he recognized that computing performance would not scale forever through traditional CPU design. A different architecture would be required. He saw a limit that others ignored. In 1993, inside a simple Denny's restaurant in San Jose, Huang met with Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preem. This wasn't a fancy boardroom. They sat in a booth near a bullet-riddled window, drinking endless cups of coffee. Over those tables, they discussed a bold thesis. Graphics would become central to computing. They founded Nvidia that year. Huang was exactly 30 years old, fulfilling his promise to Lori. The odds, brutal. The market, volatile. The capital, limited. But conviction outweighed comfort. The first major product, the NV1 chip, was a disaster. It tried to do everything but did nothing well. Nvidia burned through cash rapidly. By 1996, the company was weeks away from running out of money. Many startups would have folded. Instead, Huang made a ruthless decision. He fired half the staff and pivoted aggressively. He bet the entire company on a new architecture. It was a high-risk reset. He told his remaining team, "We are 30 days from going out of business." That sense of urgency never left him. In 1999, Nvidia launched the GeForce 256, marketed as the world's first GPU, graphics processing unit. The term itself reframed the category. Instead of a simple graphics accelerator, Nvidia positioned the chip as a parallel processing engine. This was not branding, it was strategic positioning. The IPO followed the same year. Nvidia survived. It became the king of the gaming world. But most companies would have remained focused on gaming. It was profitable, predictable. But Huang saw something deeper. He noticed that researchers were starting to use GPUs for complex math problems that had nothing to do with video games. GPUs were inherently parallel. They could perform thousands of operations simultaneously. If software could unlock that parallelism, the GPU could move beyond graphics. The industry was not ready, but Nvidia prepared anyway. In 2006, Nvidia launched CUDA. It was a massive gamble. It cost billions in R&D and added significant cost to every chip sold with no immediate market. For years, investors hated it. They called it a waste of resources. During the 2008 financial crisis, Nvidia's stock price plummeted by over 80%. Critics called for Huang to step down, but he refused to pivot. He knew that by making GPUs programmable, he was creating a software platform, not just selling hardware. CUDA created lock-in. CUDA built developer loyalty. CUDA became Nvidia's moat. In 2012, the world finally caught up. A neural network called AlexNet demonstrated unprecedented performance in image recognition by using Nvidia GPUs. This was the inflection point. Researchers realized that deep learning required massive parallel computation. CPUs could not compete. The AI era accelerated, and Nvidia was already positioned at its core. They hadn't just followed a trend. They had built the engine 10 years before the car was invented. Gaming was no longer the primary growth engine. Data centers became Nvidia's largest revenue driver. Cloud providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft needed acceleration. AI startups needed scale. Every model trained, from medical research to ChatGPT, required GPUs. Demand surged globally. Huang's leadership style is direct. He doesn't have a traditional office. He wanders the halls, sitting with engineers. He is known for challenging them publicly in meetings, not to intimidate, but to refine thinking. He calls it intellectual honesty. Precision matters, speed matters, execution matters. In a capital-intensive industry, there is no room for ambiguity. In 2020, Nvidia announced a $40 billion acquisition of ARM. The move would have expanded Nvidia's influence across global chip architecture. Regulators intervened. The deal collapsed in 2022. For many CEOs, such a setback would weaken momentum. Nvidia moved forward without hesitation, focusing on their Omniverse and their own CPU designs. In 2023, Nvidia crossed $1 trillion market capitalization. The driver? Artificial intelligence infrastructure. Huang's long-term bet on GPU acceleration and CUDA had compounded for over a decade. Markets finally realized that Nvidia wasn't just a chip company. It was the toll booth for the future of intelligence. His black leather jacket has become symbolic. It signals consistency, identity, confidence. He wears it in every keynote, in every weather. Unlike executives who shift personas with trends, Huang's presence remains stable. Engineer first, CEO second. The jacket is not fashion. It is branding discipline. It represents the always a startup mentality he maintains. Today, AMD and Intel continue to challenge Nvidia. Tech giants are building their own chips, but Nvidia's advantage is not only silicon performance, it is ecosystem depth. Thousands of libraries, millions of developers, and decades of software integration. Moats in technology are rarely visible from the outside. They are built line by line, year after year. Huang holds a significant equity stake in Nvidia. His wealth scales with the company's performance. This alignment between founder and enterprise creates long-term decision stability. He isn't looking at the next quarter. He is looking at the next decade. He often talks about chasing $0 billion markets. Markets that don't exist yet, but will change everything. Huang frequently describes AI as the next industrial infrastructure, comparable to electricity or the internet. Not a product, not a feature, an underlying layer of civilization. If that thesis proves correct, Nvidia is not merely a chip company, it is a foundational platform provider for the next stage of human evolution. From a child cleaning toilets in Kentucky, to an engineer mastering silicon systems, to the CEO guiding the backbone of the AI revolution, Jensen Huang's story is not accidental. It is a study in resilience, long-term positioning, and strategic ecosystem building. The AI era did not emerge overnight. It was engineered, and at its center stands the architect. If you want to understand the future of computing, watch the infrastructure, and watch the man building it. If you found this deep dive into the architect of the AI age valuable, don't let the algorithm decide what you learn next. Smash that like button to support the channel and subscribe to join our community of forward thinkers. We're breaking down the empires of tomorrow, every single week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.